Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, retired U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and now the president of strategic risk management firm KIP. Hal, better to have no deal than a bad deal. Was the president right not to give in on sanctions relief?
Michelle, I think he was absolutely right. And when you're negotiating with the North Koreans, they will play what is a kind of a strategic shell game. The president alluded to our intelligence capabilities with North Korea. I mean, he kind of said we know every square inch. That's a little bit of maybe an overstatement, but we have very good intelligence collection on North Korea. And as you know, we've talked about this. It hasn't been exactly a complete secret that they've been moving a lot of their nuclear capability to other places. And I think that caught them off guard. You know, they said, we're going to dismantle Yongbyon, and it's, well, what about your other facility? And I think that literally caught them off guard, and they just couldn't move fast enough. The other thing is they're now trying to spin this to say, well, we weren't talking about removing all the sanctions. I'm pretty sure that what they were talking about was removing all the sanctions, and it was in exchange for something that just simply was not acceptable. And with the North Koreans, sometimes you just have to walk away from the table.
Hal, very quickly, what do you see happening next here?
Well, I think you're going to see South Korea is going to try and broker this. They're going to try and find some wiggle room, if you will, try and find some different avenues to see if we can meet some sort of agreement. I don't think you're going to see anybody rushing into a summit right now. Even after Reykjavik back in the 80s, there was a period of time where we wanted to make sure that the next summit was going to come away with something very successful for both sides. This is kind of the same thing, which is, you know, I don't know if collapse might be too strong a term for the summit, but we just didn't get anything out of it. They didn't get anything out of it. There'll be some face saving on both sides, but we're going to be building the foundation so the next time there is a meeting, if it is a meeting between the two leaders or maybe just below that level, that we'll get some sort of agreement on something, maybe give a little bit on the sanctions, they'll give a little bit on the nuclear capability, but I think the fact that we knew so much about what they were doing caught them by surprise.
All right, Hal, stick around after the break. We're going to talk about another nuclear flashpoint, Pakistan and India. Welcome back to Clear Cut. I'm Michelle McCory. India and Pakistan may be prepared to step back from the brink of war. Pakistan's prime minister saying that he would release a captured Indian fighter pilot to prevent war. The pilot was shot down conducting airstrikes against a terrorist group suspected of a deadly bombing against Indian security forces in Kashmir. Now, the bombing set off a tit-for-tat along the border between the nuclear-armed nations. And while Pakistan appears to be offering a step back, India says that its forces will remain on high alert even after the pilot is returned.
Today, through this platform, I am telling India, don't take things further, because whatever you will do, Pakistan will be compelled to retaliate. I also hope the international community will play its part, so that the situation does not escalate from this stage where we are now. We are holding an Indian pilot, and we have decided to release him to India as a peace gesture tomorrow.
And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke for the first time today about the military standoff.
India will live as one. India will work as one. India will grow as one. India will fight as one. India will win as one.
All right, back with me now, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer, a retired U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, and now the president of strategic risk management firm KIP. Hal, if this pilot is returned to India, is that enough to dial this back? Does it diffuse the situation, at least for now?
Michelle, what that will probably do is it will de-escalate the situation. Obviously, the longer they held him, the more that was going to raise the temperature, if you will, of the body politic in both nations. Releasing him kind of removes that entire issue. Now, there's other issues that are being looked at. You know, there was an exchange of artillery fire across the border. Indian tanks have moved to essentially one of their battle positions along the border. Everything's at a heightened state of alert. So there's a lot of other de-escalation that has to happen. And then, of course, there's also the issue of the F-16 that Pakistan has, whether that was used in an offensive action against India, which would be a violation of the rule by which they're allowed to have F-16s. So there's a lot of other incumbent issues that have to be looked at beyond just the wing commander being returned to India.
All right, Hal, you mentioned the situation with the F-16, some controversy over that. Let's focus on that. Pakistan is denying that it used U.S.-made F-16s in the strike, as you mentioned. The U.S. bans using its fighter jets in offensive missions. So do you see the U.S. taking any action against Pakistan for this?
It's possible. I don't know. Certainly, we would prefer not to have to take action. The F-16s are a vital part of the Pakistani Air Force. It's also a very important component. It's kind of the backbone of their airstrike component in the war on terror, if you will. And they have a lot of things that they are prosecuting, and I mean that in a battle sense, going in there and bombing targets to take out Taliban and other terrorist targets. So taking the F-16s out of action with some sort of decision like that would, one, be difficult to enforce, but two, would also be a very difficult thing for the Pakistani Air Force to get beyond. The problem that the Pakistan is running into is that there is actual evidence on the ground that a missile was fired from an F-16, and that missile could only have been fired from an F-16, and the Indians have that evidence. So it's very difficult to explain how that did not come from a Pakistani F-16.
Right.
So,
yeah, good point. As you say, that's one of the issues that Pakistan has. Another issue here, Hal, is that even if this pilot is returned and this calms the immediate cycle of escalation, what happens if there is another attack by a Pakistani militant group like the one that sparked this whole thing off? I mean, does Pakistan need to be more aggressive in taking action to rein in these organizations, especially Jaish-e-Mohammed, the terrorist or militant organization that India claims was behind the initial attack that sparked this?
Michelle, when you say Pakistan, there's different factions. A lot of these groups that are prosecuting terrorist attacks in Kashmir and elsewhere in India were actually kind of set up by the ISI, the intelligence service within Pakistan. So there is kind of this dynamic tension within the Pakistani government where the ISI kind of has what they've been doing for decades in terms of basically fostering and supporting these groups to do things like what we just saw. And at the same time, the government is trying to pull that back, and there's a little bit of a Byzantine political battle within Pakistani politics in terms of the ability to rein in some of the ISI operations. There's a lot behind the scenes that they have to work through. With that said, Imran Khan, coming from completely outside, there is some thought that he may be the one leader who could probably turn this around. But with that said, I know, having looked very closely at Pakistani politics for a number of years, there's a lot of obstacles and a lot of hurdles to get to the point where they're going to stop supporting these groups from doing these attacks, because it's Pakistani foreign policy is that they want to bring Kashmir into to be territorially integral to Pakistan, and I don't see how they're going to change that within the way that they basically define themselves.
Right, and of course, a lot at stake for Modi as well, with him facing elections. He really wants to push this nationalist spirit in India, which is also perhaps upping the ante from the Indian perspective. Hal, thank you as always for your time. Appreciate you joining us for this as well.